Hello, everyone. I'm Saleha, and this is Chai, Chat, and Community. How are you feeling? Are you feeling okay? I'm not talking about your physical health, I'm asking about your mental health. Have you been feeling good, bad, or a bit of a meh? These have been trying times for the last year and a half, and for many of us, we don't talk about our mental health. When was the last time you spoke with someone or went to your doctor and told them that you're not feeling too good? Now, what exactly is mental health? The WHO describes mental health as a state of well being in which every individual realizes their full potential, can cope with normal stresses of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and make a contribution to their community. Australia's Health 2020 report shows that 1 in 5 Australians have a mental health condition. And before I introduce you to my guest tonight, I'll share some statistics with you from the Australian Institute of Health and Welfare, a government body, that found that in the 4 weeks to 24th of January 2021, Lifeline received more than 85,000 calls, an increase of 10% from the 4 weeks to January 2020. Beyond Blue received more than 22,000 contacts, an increase of 27.2% from the 4 weeks to January 26, 2020. And Kids Helpline received more than 23,000 answerable contact attempts, a decrease of 8.5% from 26 January 2020. And in 2020, the number of suspected or confirmed deaths by suicide in New South Wales was 896, in Victoria 698, and in Queensland 777, similar to that of 2019. I'm pleased to welcome my guest tonight, Dr. J. Sarkar, Muneet Narang, and Vaishali Budige. Hello, everyone, and thank you for coming to the show.
Hi,
Hello.
Saleha. Hi, everybody else.
Uh, Before we start talking about mental health and coping strategies, Jay, do you want to tell our viewers something about yourself?
I was born in the state of Bihar in India, did my schooling there, and then moved to Calcutta, where I completed my medical graduation. And then we moved to Bombay as a family. So I spent a year or so there, and then went down to Bangalore to do my post-graduation in psychiatry. And being the forever wanderer, I moved up to Delhi then to do some more training. And by then I had had enough of India, so I moved to the UK back in the mid 90s. Spent many years there, and in 2012 we moved to Singapore to get closer back to our country of origin. And 3 years back we moved to Australia. So I've been a bit of a globetrotter in that sense, and yeah, so that's been the journey of me as a psychiatrist, training and working in different countries. I suppose if you were to ask me something about my sort of personal side, I enjoy singing and music, and have been doing so for many years from my sort of school days. And if I weren't a doctor,
And you sing, yes?
which
Sorry,
wasn't
go
my
on.
first choice to be a doctor, I'd probably be a musician or a singer somewhere. So I love
Opera
anything,
singer? Opera
from
singer?
opera to qawwali, yeah, opera to qawwali, from Arabic music to Rabindra Sangeet, you name it. It just has to, touch a chord in my heart, and I'm off. I'll probably stop there, Saleha.
Thank you, Jay. Monique, you want to say something about yourself, please?
So, I've been working as a physiotherapist for so long now, but here in Australia, it's been since 2014. I'm here. Right now I'm doing training and assessing. Like I train diploma in early childhood education and care, and I work with disabled kids, vulnerable kids, and I plan accordingly what they want, how they want, what are the things that are necessary for them for their development. And I even run a not-for-profit organization called as Ethnic Women in Australia, where I'm trying to divert my mind actually and help others who really need that help and but they don't want to tell. So that's the reason that I joined an NGO. So that's what I'm doing as of now.
Thank you, Muneet. Vaishali?
Oh, hi everyone. So I'm from all over India, similar to Jay. So I'm ancestrally from the south, Tamil, but I was born in Delhi, lived in Gujarat, but I've been here most of my life. I came here with my parents in the 80s. And I studied physiotherapy, and the past 2 decades have been in mental and physical well-being and injury management. So that's sort of my area of work and expertise. I'm just really grateful and humbled to be talking about mental health, which is quite close to my heart, and to be able to share my journey and hopefully, inspire you all to live life to its fullest. So, thank
You,
you.
Vaishali. Shall we start with your story first?
Sure. So my husband, Vamsi Krishna Budige, was no less loved or no less known than the famous cricketer Sachin Tendulkar, especially in the Indian Australian community. He started the Melbourne Uni Indian Club. He was, really, really well known, let's just put it that way. But around 10 years ago, he was diagnosed with clinical depression. He didn't know that he was actually unwell. One of his friends said, "You don't seem like yourself." So he went to the doctor, and then once she spoke to him, he realised that he was experiencing suicidal ideations. So she popped him on antidepressant medication, and he also started psychotherapy, so seeing a psychologist. And he was really, really diligent with all of that. I sort of felt that, what was the root cause and what are some of the other things that can also help him and help myself to help him, because, so I started off studying quite intensely, a lot of spiritual texts, yoga, Reiki, pranic healing, mindfulness, acceptance and commitment therapy, basically anything and everything to try and help myself and to offer him the tools as well to help himself. And he did try yoga, he tried meditation, and a lot of various cleansing diets and, things like that. But he was, I suppose, the most consistent with, seeing the GP, the psychologist, and the medication. So he was pretty, diligent with that. Life was a bit of a roller coaster ride, obviously. And, that seed had been sown in my mind of his suicidal ideation. So if there were times that I couldn't reach him, I would become really, really anxious. I'd be like, oh my God, what's happened? Or, and so that was always sort of quite a challenging piece, I guess, over the past decade. But generally, he appeared to be very, very highly functioning. He was very active in the community, very, very heavily involved with community work, always smiling, always there helping people. So very, very high functioning. So, at least I had that sort of like, oh no, he's doing okay. And then, and I suppose just the support and the love that we had from family and community, and just our deep commitment to each other, that no matter what life throws at us, that we will get through this. And we've got two beautiful daughters who are now 12 and 14. They were sort of this silver lining in, that dark cloud of his depression that sort of kept us both going. Anyway, then in about July 2019, I had to teach at a physio yoga conference. And so I said to him, hey, why don't we go away for our belated 15th wedding anniversary? So we left both the girls back in Melbourne. With that family support, we were able to have the best time of our lives that we hadn't for, over 15 years, because we hadn't been away from our girls. He hired a motorbike. And we just, traveled the roads of Bali, exploring ancient temples, just magical waterfalls, and just, the wind blowing through our hair. And I'm just holding on to him for dear life, going, we haven't updated our will with our second daughter. Please drive carefully. Just absorbing all the smells and sounds of Bali, like this beautiful tropical country, the wind blowing through our hair. Like, we were just like pre-kids, when we were in our 20s, when we got together. It's just like this amazing, amazing journey. And I just, we would just stop on the road, sip fresh coconut water, go get these amazing massages for next to nothing. If anyone's been to Bali, you probably know that you can have that. So it was just the most magical, blissful holiday. And it really sort of helped to, save our marriage or re-strengthen, because it was getting strained over the years of this roller coaster with his mental health. Anyway, so we, came back after all of that. And exactly about a month later, so on 21st of July 2019, it was just a normal, chaotic family day for us. Normal Sunday. He was trying to get a lot of work done. He was just typing at his laptop, or that's what I thought. And I dropped the girls off at singing, did the grocery shopping, picked them up, came home, made lunch. And he owned a restaurant. So I was sort of like asking them all, what do you think of my pav bhaji, which is like an Indian street food? And he's like, what do you think? I'm like, oh, maybe some salt and some dhania powder. And then he's like, yeah. And then he's like, oh, it's amazing. Look, I've just had breakfast. You just give me a little serve. So he had that. The kids ate it. And then we still, and then as I was cleaning up the kitchen, this sort of thought just popped into my head, and it just said, don't get too excited, in just this sheer joy and happiness. I just felt like, oh my God, with this perfect, blissful family. And it was just like, change is the only constant, don't get too carried away in these fleeting moments of pure bliss. I was just like, nah, life is so good. We're awesome, perfect family. Anyway, we still had a long afternoon ahead. We had, a restaurant launch party for a friend, afternoon tea. And then his dad said, let's all go to the temple. And Vamsi, I said to him, should we do all of this? And he's like, yeah, we'll go to all of it. I'm like, okay, even though I was feeling quite tired. And I started preparing for a mindfulness presentation that I was due to conduct at Mercedes in a couple of days. So he's just tapping away at his laptop, and I'm just sitting here trying to, work out the mindful meditation and breath meditation. And then we started realizing that he said, oh, I've just got to go to Dandenong. And I said, okay, cool. And I said, look, but I don't want to go to the launch party by myself with the kids, because you've missed the last few parties, like you've not turned up. So they're just like, oh my God, they're all going to go, where's Bumsy? And I was like, I want to go as a family, I'm going to wait for you. And he was like, okay. And then we realized that time started slipping away. And I said, oh my God, now we're running really late. Why don't I just, okay, fine, I'll just meet you at the launch party. And then maybe we can go to the temple together, but that's fine. You just go do your thing. Because he always had stuff to do with the restaurant, going by meat or meeting suppliers. So I said, okay, that's fine. Anyway, so got to the launch party, but there was only like 20 minutes left, but they had just started taking food orders. So I started saying, so I just texted him, and I was like, hey, what do you want to eat? And he didn't reply. So then I was like, oh my God, he's going to miss, the orders. So then I rang him at like 3:40. I'm like, ring. And then there was just no answer. And then I tried again 5 minutes later, no answer. 3:55, again rang, and I'm like, okay, what's going on? There's no answer. Then I rang again at 4:02. Just, there's just no answer. So my anxiety obviously really started to take over. And I started to obviously start, thinking the worst again, as I used to, spiral into this anxiety of, oh my God, why can't I reach him? And then at about 4:15, and in between, I'm just constantly trying to ring him. And I went outside the restaurant because it was quite noisy, and I was getting quite flustered and quite anxious at not being able to reach him. The accountant rang, and he said, and he was driving, and I think he just briefly saw in his Apple Watch, like, dear something, and then, oh, you can look after the family better than me, or some, like, he sort of was like, oh my God. But obviously he couldn't, pull over So he ended up ringing me, and he's like, "Oh, I just saw this, text," and so straight away I just jumped on the phone to 000, and I was like, "I think my husband's trying to take his life." He said he was heading towards Dandenong. And then I turned around, and at that time she was 12. She was just standing there, and she heard all of this, and she just completely broke down, and I was just obviously beside myself. And so I sort of just pushed her back into the restaurant. I was like, someone can just, deal with you. And I think friends later said, like, she was sort of hyperventilating. They didn't know. Anyway, so then in the meanwhile, other people, like his dad, started trying to ring me. All these people are trying to ring me in between. And I'm just like, get off the phone. I'm trying to ring, 000, and I'm trying to ring him constantly every, minute. And then at 4:36, someone picked up the phone, and I was like, "Oh, hi." I was just like, "Oh my God, hi, Bobby," and it's like, "Oh, hi, it's, the police, like Sergeant someone." And I was just, like, oh my God, my heart sank. And he said, "Look, there was just, this phone abandoned in a car on the freeway, and just there was a bit of suspicious activity. So we've been called to the scene, and we've been here for half an hour. We'll let you know once we find something out." Anyway, so then obviously the next, few hours, I was just spending going, okay, he's gone for a walk, he's gone for a run, his car broke down and he's forgotten to take his phone, just trying to, visualize and bless him, and just that, convince myself that everything's fine, because it usually is. I can get through to him at the end of it all. And anyway, so the next few hours were just, I don't know, felt like days. And then we got a call at 7:30, and they'd said, "We've found the body." And yeah, my world just came crumbling down. And that whole night, I think, I don't know who was crying or louder, his mum or me. It was just these waves of just grief and sobbing and primal howling, like it was just inexplicable what, we went through. I had my best friend next to me. She was just holding on to me for dear life. And so, one of us would stop crying and then the other would start. So that just went on all night long. And then in the morning, I went downstairs and I opened, our spare keys are in the kitchen cupboard, and the house key. So I opened the cupboard and I saw his car keys, and that just set me off. I just curled into a ball, and I was just bawling. Like, I was like, I can't do this. And then, so I just lay there, and then I just felt a hand on my shoulder, and it was my mother-in-law, and she sort of said, "Look, what's happened's happened. You're going to have to stay strong. You've got your two girls. You have to be strong for them. You can't just lie here in a ball." And so I just at that point decided, you know what? I'm going to draw into every ounce, into the core of my being, and I'm going to do whatever it takes to make sure that my girls and I get through this, that we can do it. We've got support, and I'll do anything and everything to make sure that they're protected and they're going to turn out okay. We will be okay. And then from there, the next few months, like, he had a few businesses. So it was just this daily cycle of sending them off to school, crying, doing some of the work, which was very, very complex. And so my brain could barely process any of it. So I could manage 1 or 2 hours and then crash into a sleep, cry, then put on a brave face for the girls when they came home. And this just cycle continued for many, many months, because it was a very, very complex, business structures that he had. And that sort of, in between my mental functioning and then trying to just, be present for the girls. Anyway, things started getting under control around March. But then we all know that obviously the pandemic hit the world. And so obviously both the girls were homeschooling. It was my daughter's last year. The second one's, she was in grade 6, the last year of schooling, but she became quite sort of disengaged. and didn't really cope, that well with the schooling. But, I just sort of said to them, I completely avoided putting on the news, watching and listening to anything. Briefly, I got caught up in the conspiracy theories, but mostly I made sure that, they were really not exposed to any of that. They had enough in their life to deal with. So I've made them go for daily walks around the block, no matter what happened. We made sure that, they ate healthy food. I made sure that, we expressed gratitude for, everything, being able to step out of the house. I know we were in Melbourne, which had some of the harshest lockdown in the world, but hey, we were still able to leave our house and go for a walk around the block, be able to smell, breathe in the fresh air, and so I sort of just made it a very big mission of mine to make sure that they don't suffer, mentally as much as possible from the effects of this, because it was it was very unnerving for the whole world, and I don't need to go into that too much.
Yeah. I'll
Anyway.
get Jay here at this point, Vaishali, if you don't mind. Yeah.
Go for it.
Jay, tell us about depression, please, and how does it affect men and women? There are very few people like Vaishali, who's going to talk coping strategies and what she's doing. And another question is, why do people commit suicide? We do have a viewer question, but Maya, we'll answer your question after Jay's answered mine.
Thanks, Saleha. Vaishali, I'm really sorry to hear of your loss and what you went through. It's always difficult when a loved one passes on. It's even more challenging when they die through suicide. And the survivors left with the feeling, did I do anything wrong? Could I have done something more? What else could I have done? Did I not be there for the person? So that there is not just sort of surviving as a grieving partner and spouse, but also the guilt that overcomes someone. So it's a really hard period for people. I think, Saleha, to answer your question, we all experience a range of emotions in our everyday lives, ranging from anxiety, sadness, joy, fear, panic, jealousy, guilt, you name it. We all have it. And, it's normal to experience emotion. But we also have the capacity to cope with those emotions when things are going well for us. Depression is something different qualitatively as well as quantitatively from normal sadness that we all experience. And it differs in several ways, but specifically in three ways. One, it is excessive. The sadness that the person feels is excessive to the circumstances and situations that he or she find themselves in. Often there is no reason for the person to feel depressed. And that's why depression as a disorder, as an illness, is different from the sadness that we feel in our lives following losses and stressors. So some people are genetically predisposed to suffer from depression without any reason. And their depression is usually very intense, very biological in nature, and require significant amounts of treatment with medication as well as non-medication.
So are you saying it's hereditary?
Some depressive conditions are inherited, yes. There's a genetic familial link. So we generally don't talk about our mental health problems, unlike physical health problems that you stated at the outset of this show. But some of it is hereditary. Some others is due to vulnerability, due to experiences in our growing up years. So if there's a lot of demand placed on the child, if there's a lot of criticism in the child's environment, if the child experiences abuse of a physical or a sexual nature, these reduce the person's self-esteem, self-confidence, their perception of themselves as someone who is autonomous and can overcome adversities. So that's another factor which leads vulnerable people to react adversely to normal stresses that others may be able to overcome, but then go down, go under with depressive symptoms. And then there's a third group, all of us currently during the pandemic, where what we are experiencing, the kind of stress that we are experiencing is unusual. We've never had to live through wars, we've never had to live through pandemics before, and this is not the kind of stresses that any one of us have experienced in our lifetime before. So during this pandemic, there is already an evolving surge of a mental health pandemic, which will follow the current sort of physical health pandemic. So there are various reasons for depression. But what is it? One, it is excessive sadness with or without any reason. Second, it is pervasive. Nothing helps shift the mood. So whilst normal sadness, even when someone is grieving at the loss of a loved one, the sadness comes in waves and then it sort of goes away. So there are periods when people feel really low and wish they were dead as well and be able to join their loved ones. But then the sort of next moment they're sort of thinking, no, I have to, like Vaishali did, I have to live for my children. I have to make sure that I bring them up in a proper way. So the mood shifts from sadness to a more positive state of mind. But in clinical depression, it doesn't shift, it's pervasive. And thirdly, it's persistent. It doesn't go away. For day after day, week after week, the person feels sad. Now, there are people who are able to smile through their depression, which is unusual to know, but there are people who we call sort of, smiling depressed, which makes it very tricky, that they are able to sort of smile through their day so that others around them, the loved ones, can't actually make out whether they are genuinely depressed or not. And it's possible that Bamsi was one of such a person. And such individuals have this sort of very strong sense of duty to themselves, the family, the community. So they can't, however sad and upset and distressed they're feeling internally, they can't give up. They carry on with a smile on their face. And it's possible sometimes that they decide a lot earlier than the final event, suicide, what they want to do with their life. But they go through the motions of life with a smile on their face, which makes it really hard for people around them to know what really is going on. So in terms of symptoms of depression, and it is not just feeling sad, that's just one part of it. Depression as a disorder, as an illness, comes with a cluster of symptoms. So you have emotional symptoms such as feeling sad, feeling anxious, lots of guilt, mood swings from anxiety to panic to fear to absolute suicidal feelings, as well as anger. Men experience a lot more irritability and anger than women do. Women cry a lot. Men often don't cry because the way boys are raised, you've got to sort of man up and head up. You shouldn't cry. You're a sissy if you cry. Girls cry. Boys grow up with this kind of messaging from their family and community all along. So they are less likely to reveal their depression as easily as women might. So that's one set of symptoms. The other set is, our thinking changes when we are depressed, clinically depressed, mind you. There's a lot more negativity about the self, that you're no good. There's an inner voice, there's an inner critic that's sitting inside your head and constantly commenting on every little error, failure, mistakes that you made. Oh, look, you got out of the bed 5 minutes late. Something as innocuous as that. And that criticism is ongoing, never ceasing. Winston Churchill, the British Prime Minister, used to call depression. He used to suffer from bipolar depression.
Yes.
So he would have periods of highs and periods of low. He used to call it the black dog.
Yep.
And it is something that's dark and gloomy and foreboding that kind of descends on you, on your soul and your spirit. So the thinking becomes very negative towards self. The thinking becomes negative about others. No matter how much you reassure them, the depressed person feels that people are not going to be really interested in me. They're not going to really be able to help me. Even if I tell them, they won't understand what I'm going through, because what I'm going through is so unusual. There is no reason for me to feel so sad. There is that feeling that, I should be doing what others are doing. So there is that negative view about others, and there is a negative view about the future, that the future looks really bleak, that no matter what I do, this is not going to change. This is what my life is going to be day after day, year on in. So there is no light at the end of the tunnel that the person can see. Then you have the physical symptoms. The sleep can be really poor, or it can be the opposite. They sleep excessively. Not necessarily that they're sleeping, but they're lying in bed for hours and hours. The appetite can change, that can increase. They put on a lot of weight because of comfort eating, just sort of eating something to sort of lift their mood, or they go off food and there's significant loss of weight. For men in particular, sexual activity can go down remarkably because they're just not interested in it. Or conversely, it can go up in an attempt to sort of find that spark and an attempt to feel better and good with their partners and their spouses and loved ones. There's a feeling of tiredness and fatigue all the time. Little things can tire you out very quickly. You cannot concentrate for long periods of time. Your memory starts to wane. You become very forgetful. And so this is all that the person who is suffering is going through. But there are things that others observe as well, the change in behavior. And that's the first point that I say to people, that, you have someone depressed around you or anxious. Notice what's different, what has changed. Notice, but don't judge. Because people are so defensive about mental health issues that if you say, oh, I think you're a little bit depressed or you're a little bit anxious, they'll say, no, I'm not. And then you're sort of blocked off there. But if you notice what has changed and comment on this, give them the facts, they can't deny it. You say, hey, mate, I've been with you a very long time. You're a really chirpy guy otherwise. But of late, I found you to be a really grumpy bear. You get irritable very, very quickly. Is everything all right? And the person may say, oh, yeah, everything's fine. But then don't stop there. You can ask, follow up, ask the same question twice. Are you really sure that everything is all right? And then sort of reassure them. So the behavior changes. They cannot do the usual things that they do in their day-to-day life. They can't work very well. If it's a school-going child, the school performance drops. If it's a housewife, they can't attend to their day-to-day responsibilities at home. So their work performance drops. And this is what is called sort of impairment in the functions, the role function that we all have. They cannot derive any joy and pleasure from the pleasurable activities. So they stop going out with friends, they stop sports, if that's what they did, they stop everything that they really did to fill up their time outside of work. They stop, reduce socializing. There is an increase in use of alcohol or drugs in an attempt, or even prescription medication, in order to treat themselves, medicate themselves. There may be some, for men in particular, there may be some indiscreet sort of relationships that they sort of get into in order to sort of find that spark that is so missing from their lives. And there is sort of change in their personal appearance. They stop looking after their personal sort of appearance, grooming, the standard of hygiene drops, self-care drops. So you have all of these things happening side by side and persisting for a very long period of time. And that's what clinical depression is. So as you can tell, it's very different from the normal sadness that we feel. We may feel sad, but we still turn up to work. We can still put on a mask, get through the day, come back, and say, oh my God, that's another day done. But the depressed person can't do it. You asked the question, how is it different across the two genders?
Yes.
I think, yeah, and I think when boys and girls are young, when they're 8, 10, 12 years old, boys actually, in surveys, doesn't found boys report more sadness than girls do.
Really?
Because boys,
Wow.
boys are out and about. They get bullied a little bit more. They get into fights with school kids. They might be in trouble at school. They're pulled up a little bit more. Girls, because of their temperaments, generally are much more quieter, obedient, compliant. Of course, I'm sort of overgeneralizing that. It's not always the case, but generally speaking. But something starts to change between the age of sort of 15 and 18 in adolescent, or middle adolescent to older sort of adolescence, where girls start to internalize their negative feelings. So girls start to become more and more depressed, or certainly they report more depressed, whereas boys stop reporting it. Boys actually then start to engage in bad behaviors. So their behavior in school changes. They may become a bit disruptive. They get into fights. The school performances drop. their performance in sort of sporting activities, social groups, that kind of becomes problematic. They might be getting into fights. They start to take experiment with drugs and alcohol. There is indiscreet sexual activity, unsafe activities, risk-taking behaviors. So generally, by the time you're in early adulthood, boys have gone into a sort of very different trajectory, or men, young men now, compared to young women. Young women, the rates of depression are highest during the childbearing years, so from the age of about 18 to late 30s to 40. Women will report and be diagnosed with depression far more than men would. Okay. However, if you look at suicide rates, the highest peak suicide rates is between the age of 20 to 40 for men. Men commit suicide much more than women.
Is
So
that true
seven.
for you, Vaishali? Yes, sorry. Is that
Yeah, he was 43, so yeah.
Yeah, that's the peak. That doesn't mean that people can't
Yeah.
take their own lives after the age of 40 as well. But men tend to, if there is one thing to differentiate between the two genders, women report how they feel. If they're feeling sad, they will tell you. So everyone around them knows. So that creates a network of safety and support for them. Women communicate much better than men, so they can derive support as well. Men do what they feel. They don't say it. They just act on what they're feeling. So if they're feeling really sad and low, they will act on it rather than tell you that I'm feeling really sad. Because men are, as a gender, they're focused on goals and plans to achieve those goals. And if they can't do that, they will do something else. Women, uh, their identities often occur in a kind of a context of relationships. The women have far more relationships which act as a network.
Jay, can I ask you a viewer question here? I know we haven't spoken to Muneet as yet. Sorry, Muneet, we'll just come to you. I have a question from a viewer who wants to know. She says, I am very aggressive. I become crazy when anything goes against my will. I have isolated myself. Now I just want to hit my loved ones.
Yeah, I'm not sure if the viewer is a man or a woman,
A lady?
a lady. That's all right. I think if she feels that she is feeling negative in herself, you know, without sort of labeling it as depression or anxiety or whatever, if what she's feeling is a negative emotion or negative sets of emotion, and if she has experienced some of the other things that we have talked about, change in her thinking patterns, change in her sort of physical well-being, sense of physical well-being, and change in behavior. She's obviously reporting the changes in her behavior, that she gets angry
Yes.
very rapidly. She feels like hitting others. There is a change. I would suggest that she talk about it to a professional. It doesn't necessarily have to be a psychiatrist. I mean, she can see her GP, or she can see whoever she feels comfortable with, because you have
Yeah.
to feel comfortable. But she needs to get help from outside. Something is brewing, and I think we need to address that. She needs to address it. But if I could just sort of finish very quickly, I know we're sort of getting on with time, about the suicide, the question you asked at the earlier. Um, the ways in which the highest risk factor for men in terms of committing suicide are those that are single or isolated, who become socially very isolated. There's very little network of support. And even if there is, they don't actually seek support from them because they feel no one will be able to help them. Um, and unemployment, financial worries is another big factor as a risk factor. Physical illness, particularly cardiac problems, and smoking and drugs, substances, alcohol. Those are some of the research findings of risk factors associated with men that go on to take their own lives.
Thank you, Jay. Muneet, do you want to share your story?
Oh, it makes me so overwhelmed listening to everything over here now. So it's like, with me, emotional stuff in my life, especially with the last 1.5 year, a lot of it. I just had a baby in September month who was a premature baby, and we were already coping with stress and emotional struggles with that she was a premature baby, preterm, premature, and underweight. And she was in the incubator for like around 6 weeks, and we were going through all that. And then we got news that my mother-in-law in India had to undergo an eye surgery, so she cannot travel to Australia. So we thought it's better that I go to Australia so that she can see my both the daughters. And it was almost like 6 years I never went to India. So I wanted to go down to India so that my daughters can at least be in India for once. While we traveled from here, so it was me, my elder daughter, or we were on one ticket. My younger daughter and my father-in-law were on the another ticket, and it was the same way. It was the same system while coming back. The only difference was that while coming back, we had a difference of like around
We've lost
10
one.
days different apart from each other. So we thought
Yeah.
it's okay. By the time I come back, I can settle down for 10 days. I can start my job. I can, get settled down. It will be easier for me. But then the moment I came back here in the month of March in 2020, what happened was everything went into lockdown. And my daughter got stuck there, and the borders were closed. The daughter was stuck there. She had no formula. She was on a special formula because she was a premature baby. So I took only that amount of formula that was required while the time I could stay there, and nothing else was required. So I didn't borrow. I didn't buy any extra formula for her. And the moment I reached here, borders locked down, flights got cancelled. My daughter's flights got cancelled, and now it's been 14 months that we have been just waiting for her to be here. The story of those 14 months have been so harsh because there was no formula, there was no way to send formula to India. The moment we realized that somebody could carry for us, okay, it was still difficult for them to be in Bombay to give it to them. Other than that, we had another struggle in the month of September 2020 when my brother-in-law died in an accident in Australia. That was the most devastating point in our life, and especially with my husband. Now, I wanted to stay strong for my husband because that was the only brother he had, and he was like around 9 years younger to him, like a baby to us. So the second moment, in a fraction of a second, the life changed. He just went out for his job. He was supposed to come home at 11 o'clock in the night. My husband spoke to him like a couple of minutes back there, and he was like, he's just coming home at 11 o'clock. And usually he used to come home and sleep in his room, so we used to meet in the morning. And we never realized that he never came back actually home. He died in an accident just after a couple of minutes that my husband spoke with him, and we had no clue. We got to know in the morning, like around 7:30 when the police came and they told us. We couldn't believe it. We were like, no, that's not true. We went to his room, we saw his room, searched everywhere. We thought, no, that cannot be true because he was a very, very, very safe driver. Having an accident with that kind of a guy was like not believable, because in 80 zone also he used to drive at 75, and he always used to say, I love my life. And those six, now since September 2020 till this time, every day has been a struggling day. Every day has been a struggling day. Emotionally, we have been going ups and downs, and there have been so much going around with tickets, bringing them here, doing the cremation here without our parents to be here, and still, we don't want to touch anything in his room. We have just left the room like that. His clothes, his pictures, his phone, his watch, everything we have kept it like that because we don't want the memories to go. We don't want. I'm not about my husband, but about me. I don't want his smell to go from his room. I just want that smell. I want his bed sheets to smell like him because every morning he used to bring coffee for me. Every morning he used to, wake me up for my breakfast. And he was there with me from last 3 years, staying in the same house. I don't want that smell of his clothes to go away from my house. I just want him everywhere. We are still struggling for my daughter to be here. We are still struggling for our parents to be here. Though being a citizen, okay, she's still stuck in India and we have no clue when she's coming back. It is so hard. We've been requesting government. We got flights, but the moment we're gonna book the flights, the website crashes. There are no seats, left because there are 9,000 people stuck in India. Everybody cannot get a flight. It is so hard. And we do understand, but everybody is important. The only worry that we have right now is in case of this, during this COVID time, in case something happens to my in-laws, what's gonna happen with my daughter there? Because there's no one to take care of her other than my in-laws. I don't know, like the group of friends that I had, they never, they are not ready to understand what emotional stage I'm going through. They are not ready to cope up with me. They don't want to listen to me what I'm going through. The way Jay said, few people can have a smile and they can, do. I tried that. I'm still trying that, okay? But it is hard. What is going inside in my heart and in my brain, no one knows. No one knows that. This was my second Mother's Day that I missed. I have not seen her. Last Mother's Day I missed. This Mother's Day I missed. Okay, and it was a very struggling moment in the morning when I have my elder one with me, but I don't have my younger one with me. So I could feel that pain my mother-in-law is going through. That she has only one son left now. The reason that I work for community services, involuntary services, my volunteer services, my way to, it's just that I want to keep my brain busy. I don't want my brain to relax because the moment I relax, I think of my brother-in-law, I think of my daughter. So I just don't want my brain to relax. I just want it to be keep on going on and on and on. Same as with my husband. He doesn't want to sit home. He doesn't want to, you know, stay idle at home. He just wants to keep on doing something, something, something. Because the moment we are free, we just think of him. There have been days when we don't talk with each other because I don't sometimes it is hard for me to understand what is my husband going through. And sometimes it is so hard for my husband to understand what I am going through. Because we don't have words to explain what to tell each other, like what is happening into our brains. It is very hard. And it is so hard to come and talk about it because like they said women have a group of social network and they can talk and yell and they can tell same thing like my husband cannot tell me. My husband doesn't know the way to explain it to me, and I know how hard it is for him to be going through this stage at this time. I don't know what to
Muneet,
do.
I
Sometimes
don't
it
know
is hard. Sometimes I want my friends to be with me, but then they don't want to understand what's going on. They are just thinking of, oh, it's so much of negativity, it is so much of, stress for us. But they're not ready to understand me as a friend to help me out.
Jay.
I don't know what to say.
I'm at a loss of words, so I don't know what to say. What emotional impact has the pandemic had on people like Monet? And I think,
No,
Yeah,
it is like there's no clue, there's no brains to work out. So,
yeah. I really feel for what you've gone through, Muneet. It's a enormous challenge, and it must be so
yeah,
painful as a
God,
mother
Jay, I think my network
not
broke.
not to be able to see one's daughter. Um, Saleh, I'll just sort of go back to your question, the pandemic. I think the pandemic has affected all of us in ways that we couldn't have imagined. When it started, we didn't realize the impact it would have on our everyday lives, the way it has had. You know, all of us have had to struggle with losses. If there's one thing that the pandemic has brought home to us, is accentuate the sense of loss that people like Muneet and Vaishali and many others are feeling. That not only have you sort of suffered a loss in your personal lives of a loved one, but you've also lost the usual coping strategies that we had available to us before the lockdown. I mean, I know Australia is sort of coming out of it. We are coming out on the other side, and lot many things are available to us now and possible. But I'm sort of thinking of our friends and colleagues and families back in India who are going through a real surge and a second wave that is so horrible to see on television, and the stories that we hear from our relatives and friends back home. Almost every family is affected. Most of them have lost someone or the other. Some others are struggling in hospital. But what the pandemic has done is to bring home to us an enormous amount of loss, not just of loved ones to the illness, but there is the fear of getting ill yourself and the losses that it will bring. It has brought about financial loss for many people who have lost their jobs. Um, there is sort of the social loss in terms of the lockdowns, restriction, lack of social events, ability to see people. There are so many here who are unable to visit. Muneet is an example, who can't visit families, and their families can't sort of visit them. There is interpersonal loss, limited contact with relatives, things that we look forward to, going on holidays, going for movies, going for a meal. I'm talking of India now. That's not available. So loss is a really significant issue, and alongside of that is intense fear that you will contract it. You might become ill and you might die. You may pass it to your loved ones and they might die, especially elderly parents if they live with you, or elderly relatives. Um, so there is this enormous emotional roller coaster, emotional storm that people are going through. And there are sort of two broad kinds of emotional reactions. One is people are getting sort of supercharged with emotions of fear, panic, anxiety, as well as anger, because there is very little that you can do. Short of keeping yourself safe by putting on a mask and washing your hands and social distancing, there's very little that you can do. And in places like India, the system is such at the moment that people aren't finding the help in hospitals and in the community. So fear and anger are sort of the emotions that are very intense. And then, so that's a lot of emotion. And the flip side is there is no emotion, that there are many who go into that denial mode, that this can't happen to me. It's happening to my neighbors and it's happening in the community, but I won't get it. Um, and so they remain in denial. And this emotional roller coaster, they come in waves again. It's cyclical. It's not there all the time. It's almost like a grief reaction. It sort of comes and goes. And it goes in sort of phases. So you have a phase of denial, that it's not happening, it can't affect me. I heard from many of my Indian friends and relatives that Indians are hyperimmune, that it will not affect them, that the hot temperature will kill the virus, and it's an illness of Europe and the United States, the colder countries. But we are having this big surge now in India during the summer months. After denial comes when the penny drops that this is not going to go away. Many people get very angry. If they get affected, if the family get affected, they ask the question, why me? Why did my loved ones get it? And why are people not wearing masks? Why don't we have the facilities? Why isn't the government providing? There are lots of why questions. And there's a lot of blaming others, blaming systems, blaming relatives, blaming friends, blaming yourself, and even that you didn't take enough precautions to prevent the infection. And then comes a stage of bargaining. We start to sort of bargain in our own minds that, okay, I'll start wearing masks from now on, but I'll make sure everyone else does. So you get very cross with people who are not wearing masks, or sort of, exposing their nose or wearing the mask across their chin. People turn to gods and religion and praying, if I pray, this will go away. So that's the bargain. If I do this, will the sickness and the illness pandemic go away? I'll stock medicines if I have enough medicines, if I have enough oxygen with me. So the medication and oxygen cylinders in India are disappearing off the shelves because individuals as well as organizations are stocking them at home in the hope that they will need it. And finally, they realize that nothing of this is actually going to work. If people have to get infected, they will get infected. People will die, and that's when the same kind of grief reaction strikes them of sadness. And then finally comes the acceptance that this is not going to go away. We are in this for the long haul. So those are some of the emotional reactions that people are experiencing during the pandemic.
And Muneet, with her child so far away, losing her brother in law, like a double whammy, literally,
Mm.
that must be so tough.
It is, and I can't even begin to
It
imagine
is.
how Monique is coping. Yeah,
Uh, I hope I haven't lost you. No.
That's what I
Uh,
try to say. I try to keep my mind busy. No, I'm just
you're trying.
trying to keep myself busy everywhere. Like, I don't want that my mind to relax to think about it, what's been happening. You know, I look at her on the FaceTime or maybe on the WhatsApp videos and everywhere on the FaceTime. But then she doesn't realize that I'm her mom. She keeps on running. She doesn't, talk to me properly. And I feel that pain inside in me that, my daughter is not being with me. I've missed her first walk. I've missed her first time saying my me mom. I missed that moment of hugging, kissing, being with her, sleeping with her. I miss those lots and lots of moments with her.
I can't even begin to understand. I
Everybody
mean,
has a
um,
I think, different way of coping up stuff.
yeah. Um, we are running out of time, so I'm going to be like really, really quick for this segment. Vaishali, what has been your coping strategies? You're on mute. You're on mute.
Sorry, I'll try and cram it into 1 minute.
Sorry. Yes.
That's okay. Some of the strategies that I've used is, as I mentioned before, trying to use mindfulness and meditation, exercise, especially out in nature, a clean diet. And I pretty much avoided alcohol during all of last year. I'm not going to use that as a coping mechanism. Yeah, have a drink with a friend socially, but obviously we couldn't. So I avoided it completely. And then in those moments where either my mind's drifting off into the past of that traumatic day or moving to the future, I sort of would sometimes go now, to myself, pull myself into the now. I'd sometimes use the breath. Even if you just breathe out, you sort of can come into the now. I try and sort of think about the things that I can sort of, hear, see, and sort of smell, just to pull me back into the body, into the here and now, rather than sort of spiraling, downwards or backwards into the future or into the, and forwards. I studied a diploma in sound healing last year. I'm also a yoga teacher, so I found sound to be quite a phenomenal way of meditating, because it just literally, the singing bowl or the gong just sort of shifts and stops and breaks those thought patterns, to just drop you into your stillness. So then you can stop those racing thoughts. So I've found that to be really, really amazing, both for my children and myself and, the others that have experienced it. So that's been a huge savior. And then at the end of the day, gratitude has been a very, very big part as well, that we really, if we can just focus on, there is something to be grateful for, looking for that consciously, expressing it, feeling it in our heart. I've got amazing in-laws that never blame me for what's happened, beautiful children, like I am so blessed. So I really consciously choose to look at the good in my life. I can choose to play victim. I choose not to. So that's sort of my, that we have a choice to just look for the good in our lives, no matter what's going on. And if everything's falling apart, just surrender, go within, and know that this too shall pass, that we will get through it. You will get through it. So, yeah.
You are really brave. Jaya Anand, thank you for watching. Vaishali, there's a comment for you from Jaya which says you are an inspiration. And Jay, in answer to Anand, commented saying the PS must intervene, listening to Muneet's story. Um, Muneet, how are you coping?
I'm just trying to work, be busy, be spending that time with my elder daughter because I don't want my elder daughter to face that moment of where I am leaving her apart, when I'm not taking care of her. So at least I am being with her every morning, seeing her, of course, missing my younger one a lot. But then I try to be more close with her, spend more time with my elder one, take care of her, spend time with my friends outside where I can, get some air, get some new people to, talk to, help others actually. These days I'm trying to, ask people if they need some help and I could be of help to them so that what I am going through, they don't have to go through the same.
Thank you.
That's what I'm doing.
Thank you, Muneet. Jay, not everybody is as brave as Vaishali and Muneet. So, what do you think people should do?
I think during the pandemic, and I'm sort of focusing largely on the sort of pandemic and the reactions to it, there are a few things that we can and should try and do, and some of it has been articulated by Muneet and Vaishali already. I'll just sort of put a formula to it, what they're doing. One of the first things to do in the pandemic is to accept that there are many things that are outside your control. You cannot control things. You cannot control the government. You cannot control the virus. You cannot control how it's unfolding. You cannot control the movement of the chartered flights and things like that. So if you cannot change things, it's pointless spending a lot of emotional energy worrying about it. And we need to sort of focus on the life that we have here and now and try and make the most of that. Because what we need to be mindful is that if we become emotionally weak and distressed and dysfunctional, we won't be able to be there for not just ourselves but for the people around
Gotcha.
us,
Yes.
Muneet's daughter and others that we have. So accept the uncontrollable. And I've got a mnemonic, an acronym, called FACE. Just face what's coming. F stands for focus on what is under your control. And what is in your control? You control the fact that you keep yourself disinfected, distance. You can control the fact that if you're distressed, you try and talk about it to someone else and let that person know so that they can help you. If that help is not coming, you see a professional. In our culture, in South Asian cultures, there's a lot of shame associated with acknowledging that you are psychologically somehow incompetent, that you are someone with sort of low willpower if you cannot resolve your own problems. Now
Yes.
imagine if you change the scenario, if you had a tummy ache or if you had a headache, you'll be the first one to sort of, if you clutch your tummy, 10 persons will ask you what's wrong. And you won't hold back taking a medication, going to your GP and talking about it. Why is it different when it's your mind? Is
Yeah.
your mind a rubbish bin that you throw everything in and expect it to function regardless? I think we need to sort of come around to the fact that if you are in distress, just see it as like you see your physical health
Yeah.
and report it and seek help. Then comes, the A and the C. Acknowledge your thoughts and feelings that we've said. Acknowledge it. Accept what's going on inside, and as Vaishali said, come back into the body. Come back into the body to ground yourself. And you can ground yourself by focusing on your breathing. You can push your feet hard on the floor. You can, hold your fingertips and just sort of push and feel the muscle stretch. You can, just stretch your body. All of these things stop the constant chatter, the autopilot in your head, the constant thinking and the worries and the feelings, and grounds you into the body. And then go back engaging in what you're supposed to do. And as Muneet said, that by keeping Muneet and her husband, by keeping themselves busy and active, they can distance themselves from the emotional pain that comes in each time they stop working. So sometimes focusing on what to do next. So rather than ask, why me, why me, why did it happen to me, why did I lose my partner? I know it's very painful, but if you can't find answers, you need to change the question from why me to what next? What can I do next? What can I
Which
do
is what
thereafter?
Vaishali's done.
Which is
Yes.
what both Vaishali and
Bhagat
Muneet are
and
doing,
Muneet have done. Yes.
and which is why they are examples of people who are resilient. They have tapped into their inner strength, and Vaishali has gone and trained herself in various other modalities to equip herself to deal with this. Those who can't will have to rely on others to provide these kind of inputs. And although I'm a psychiatrist, I wouldn't say that you should rush and start taking medications, but there is a legitimate role for medications in the management of it. There are times when non medication therapies and approaches will not work. And if you find that you fulfill all the criteria for depression, and no matter what you do, your mood doesn't lift, you should go and see your GP, and he or she may refer you to a psychiatrist. So medication is really key to it. I'll probably stop because I'm mindful of the time, Saleha.
Yeah. Um, Thank you, everyone, for joining me today. Important
Thank you.
discussion. And Vaishali, Muneet, more power to you. Very, very, very brave of you to come and talk about it. And Jay, thank you so much for sharing your expertise. Good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Stay safe, stay well. And if you're not feeling well, as Jay said, please go and see your GP.